You felt this before you clicked this message, a pull, a knowing, because something inside you has been shifting. You are not who you were, and you know it. You are not ordinary. You never have been. The pain you survived did not make you smaller. It made you different, set apart, marked. Listen carefully. What tried to break you was not random, it was warfare. And warfare only surrounds territory that carries value. You have walked through trauma that would have buried others. You have endured rejection that would have silenced weaker spirits. You have survived isolation that would have shattered ordinary minds. Yet here you are, awake, aware, still standing. Do you understand what that means? It means heaven never left you. It means favor never lifted. It means the enemy miscalculated, because what was sent to destroy you is being converted, transformed, upgraded. There are 9 marks, 9 confirmations, 9 signals that God is converting your past trauma into high-frequency spiritual command. Not coping, command, not survival, authority. And if you recognize yourself in this, do not scroll past it. This message found you for a reason. Engage with it, claim it, stand in it, because only the chosen will recognize what is being said here. First, the pain that once broke you now feels like training, not tragedy. Pause and feel that. There was a time when the memories crushed you, when you replayed the betrayal and it reopened wounds, when the rejection felt personal, when the abandonment felt like proof you were not enough. You remember that version of yourself, but something changed. Now, when you revisit those memories, you do not collapse. You analyze, you observe, you decode. You no longer replay trauma to relive it. You replay it to understand it. That is not numbness. That is elevation. Your discernment sharpened in the fire. Your intuition strengthened in the chaos. Your spiritual senses awakened in the dark. While others were living comfortably asleep, you were being forged. Have you noticed how quickly you read people now? How you sense shifts in energy before words are spoken that came from somewhere. It came from surviving environments where you had to read danger without instructions. It came from learning to detect subtle hostility. It came from watching patterns repeat until your spirit said, never again. What wounded you sharpened you. What tried to destroy you disciplined you. What felt like destruction was preparation disguised as disaster. You were not being punished. You were being trained. Trained for discernment. Trained for leadership. Trained for spiritual command. The world sees trauma as damage. Heaven sees it as conditioning. There is a difference, and you feel it. You no longer identify as the victim of your past. You recognize the assignment hidden inside it. That shift is a mark, a dangerous one. Because when pain becomes training, fear loses its grip. When trauma becomes instruction, manipulation stops working. When rejection becomes revelation, you stop chasing approval. You start moving with authority. And that authority carries weight. Darkness senses it. People feel it. Rooms shift when you enter. This is only the beginning. Second, you see through people instantly and it disturbs them. You noticed it. At first you thought you were overthinking. You thought maybe you were being guarded, maybe suspicious. But then it kept happening. Someone smiles. You feel tension. Someone praises you. You sense envy underneath. Someone offers help. Your spirit hesitates, and you cannot explain it with logic. There is no evidence, no visible proof. Yet you know. Listen carefully. That is not paranoia. That is perception. Trauma tuned you. When you were forced to survive environments where words did not match actions, your spirit adapted. You learned to read microshifts, tone changes, eye movements, energy fluctuations. You had to, because back then missing those cues cost you peace. It cost you safety. It cost you trust. So heaven sharpened you inside the fire. While others were allowed to be naive, you were being calibrated. And now you read motives beneath smiles. You sense manipulation before it fully forms. You detect insecurity behind arrogance. You feel hidden agendas before they unfold. That makes people uncomfortable. Why? Because darkness thrives in disguise, and you no longer fall for disguise. Have you noticed how some people grow nervous around you? How conversations shift when you enter? How certain individuals avoid eye contact? It is not because you are intimidating, it is because you are discerning. Light exposes, and exposure makes darkness restless. This is a mark. God is converting what hurt you into spiritual command. You cannot be gaslit twice. You cannot be deceived the same way. You cannot be emotionally trapped like before. The enemy lost that access, and he knows it. That is why manipulation attempts feel almost childish to you now. Predictable, transparent. You see the pattern before it plays out. You hear the script before it is spoken. You are not reacting anymore. You are observing. That shift is power. The world calls it being guarded. Heaven calls it wisdom. The world says you are too sensitive. Heaven says you are spiritually alert. There is a difference. Not everyone will understand this level of perception. Only the chosen recognize it, because only the chosen were wounded deeply enough to be sharpened this precisely. You paid for this awareness, with tears, with betrayal, with sleepless nights. But now it works for you. You walk into rooms and feel atmospheres. You sense when favor is present. You sense when warfare is rising. You adjust accordingly. You are no longer prey, you are positioned. And that positioning carries authority. Darkness cannot manipulate what it cannot confuse. And you are no longer confused. Stand firm in that. Do not dim your discernment to make others comfortable. Do not apologize for seeing clearly. Clarity is command, and command is forming inside you. This frequency is rising, it is sharpening, it is stabilizing, and it will not stop here. Third, isolation no longer feels like rejection. It feels strategic. There was a season when the silence hurt, when invitations stopped, when friendships shifted, when you felt overlooked, unchosen, outside. You questioned yourself. Why am I alone? Why does it feel like I do not belong anywhere? Why does connection slip through my hands? You thought it was loss. You thought it was failure. But now you see it differently. Now the quiet does not suffocate you. It strengthens you. Now the empty room does not echo with insecurity. It vibrates with clarity. That is not emotional numbness. That is spiritual maturity. Listen closely. When God raises frequency, He reduces noise. You were not being rejected. You were being refined. The world calls isolation abandonment. Heaven calls it consecration. There is a difference. You could not carry higher commands surrounded by lower conversations. You could not hear divine instruction drowned in constant distraction. You could not stabilize your spirit in rooms addicted to chaos. So separation became necessary. Painful, yes, but necessary. The loneliness that once crushed you now builds you. You sit alone and feel power, not lack. You walk alone and feel guided, not forgotten. You pray alone and feel heard, not ignored. That shift is a mark. Do you remember how desperate you once were for validation? How you tried to hold on to connections that were clearly misaligned? How you feared being misunderstood? Look at you now. You would rather stand alone in truth than sit in a crowd that dims your light. That is elevation. Darkness isolates to weaken. God isolates to strengthen. Darkness isolates to silence. God isolates to speak. And when He speaks, it is not noise. It is instruction. It is strategy. It is destiny unfolding in private before it manifests in public. Not everyone can survive that level of solitude. Many need constant affirmation, constant distraction, constant applause. But you were built for wilderness seasons because wilderness produces authority. You are no longer afraid of being set apart. You understand now that separation was preparation. The world may not understand your distance. They may misinterpret your quiet. They may call you distant, guarded, detached. Let them. Only the chosen recognize strategic isolation. Only the chosen know that elevation often feels like exclusion before it looks like promotion. And here is the deeper revelation. When you stopped chasing belonging, you started embodying command. When you stopped begging for inclusion, you started radiating presence. Isolation did not reduce you. It recalibrated you. Your frequency rose. Your standards rose. Your awareness rose. And now not everyone can access you. That is not arrogance. That is alignment. You are no longer available for environments that dilute your calling. You are no longer attached to circles that cannot carry your destiny. You are no longer afraid of walking alone, because you know you are not alone. Favor walks with you. Assignment walks with you. Heaven backs you. And when heaven backs you, human approval becomes optional. Feel the weight of that. You were separated to be elevated. You were hidden to be strengthened. You were isolated to be entrusted. And the command forming inside you is getting heavier, stronger, sharper. Fourth, your emotional triggers are turning into prophetic sensors. There was a time when certain words would set you off. Certain tones, certain attitudes, certain types of people. You reacted fast. Your chest tightened. Your thoughts raced. Your defenses rose. You felt ashamed of it. You asked yourself, why am I like this? Why do I feel everything so deeply? But look at you now. Something has shifted. The same situations that once provoked you now alert you. You feel the signal, but you do not explode. You notice the tension, but you do not spiral. You detect the shift, but you do not lose control. That is not suppression. That is transformation. Listen carefully. What used to trigger you is now informing you. Your body remembers. Your spirit discerns. But your mind leads. You respond with clarity instead of reaction. That is command forming. The world reacts. The chosen interpret. The world lashes out. The chosen observe and adjust. There is a difference. Your wounds have become spiritual radar. When manipulation enters the room, you feel it. When envy rises, you sense it. When spiritual warfare intensifies, your body registers it before your eyes confirm it. And this time, you are not overwhelmed. You are aware. Awareness is power. Darkness used to push your buttons. Now it exposes itself, trying. Do you see what happened? The very areas the enemy once used to destabilize you are now the places you are most alert. He lost access. He lost surprise. He lost the advantage. That is why the attacks feel different now. They do not confuse you. They confirm what you already sensed. You are no longer emotionally hijacked. You are strategically positioned. Pause and recognize this. You used to feel embarrassed by how deeply you felt things. Now you understand. You were never too sensitive. You were spiritually perceptive without guidance. And once God refined that perception, it became precision. Precision in speech, precision in boundaries, precision in timing. You do not react instantly anymore. You wait, you watch, you choose. That restraint is strength. The world equates emotion with weakness. Heaven refines emotion into discernment, and discernment into authority. You have stepped into that progression. Not everyone can. Many stay reactive. Many stay wounded. Many stay trapped in cycles of emotional chaos. But you learned, you adapted, you elevated. Your triggers no longer control you. They instruct you. And when instruction replaces impulse, command is near. Feel the weight of this. You are not fragile. You are fine-tuned. You are not unstable. You are calibrated. You are not damaged. You are weaponized against deception. Darkness knows it can no longer provoke you into self-sabotage, and that loss of control terrifies it. Because a chosen one who cannot be emotionally manipulated is spiritually dangerous, very dangerous, and the frequency inside you is still rising. Fifth, you no longer beg for understanding. You command respect in silence. There was a version of you that over-explained. You tried to make people see your heart. You tried to make them understand your intentions. You tried to prove you were not what they projected onto you. You remember that exhaustion, the long messages, the repeated clarifications, the emotional labor. You wanted peace. You wanted harmony. You wanted to be seen correctly. But now you do not chase understanding. You embody it. That shift is not pride. It is power. Trauma burned something out of you. It burned out the addiction to validation. After being misunderstood so many times, after being misjudged so casually, after being rejected without real cause, something inside you hardened in a holy way. You realize something. Those who are committed to misunderstanding you will never be convinced by explanation. And those who are aligned with you do not require defense. So you stopped performing. You stopped pleading. You stopped shrinking your truth to make others comfortable. Now your presence speaks before your mouth does. Have you noticed that you enter a room, you say nothing, yet the atmosphere adjusts? Conversations shift. Energy recalibrates. Eyes observe. Why? Because you are no longer trying to be accepted. You are standing in who you are. That is gravity. That is spiritual weight. The world respects volume. Heaven honors presence. And you are learning the difference. Those who once overlooked you now feel something they cannot name. It unsettles them because you are not seeking approval anymore. You are anchored. You are stable. You are aware of your worth without announcing it. That kind of quiet confidence terrifies insecurity. Darkness prefers you doubting yourself. It prefers you explaining yourself. It prefers you apologizing for your intensity. But you do not apologize now. You do not chase now. You do not beg now. You stand. And standing is powerful. Listen. When you no longer need validation, you become difficult to control. When you no longer seek applause, you become impossible to manipulate. When you no longer explain your boundaries, you become spiritually authoritative. That is what is forming. You are not loud. You are not arrogant. You are not aggressive. You are grounded. Grounded people carry weight, and weight creates space. Space where respect grows. Space where authority stabilizes. Space where destiny expands. You can feel it. You are not just surviving anymore. You are carrying something. Anointing, command, a frequency that does not bend to misunderstanding. Let them question. Let them speculate. Let them whisper. You are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to fulfill assignment. An assignment does not require universal approval. It requires alignment. The need to be validated has fallen away. What remains is conviction. What remains is authority. What remains is a presence that speaks even when you do not. That is not ego. That is elevation. And this is only the pivot. Sixth, you feel a rising authority when chaos appears. This is where it becomes undeniable. There was a time when conflict drained you, when tension made your stomach tight, when crisis felt like threat. But now something different happens. When confusion enters the room, you do not shrink, you straighten. When voices rise, you do not scatter, you focus. When everything feels unstable, you become still. Have you noticed that while others panic, you stabilize? While others react, you assess. While others spiral, you anchor. That is not personality. That is preparation. Your suffering trained you for this. Every unpredictable environment, every emotional storm, every season where you had to survive instability, it was conditioning. Heaven was building pressure tolerance. Darkness thought it was overwhelming you. God was strengthening you. Crisis does not collapse you anymore. It energizes you, not in chaos, but in clarity. You feel sharp, alert, present. Because you have been here before, you have walked through internal wars that were louder than this external noise. You have faced betrayal, loss, fear, uncertainty, and you survived. So when smaller storms come, you do not tremble. You remember. You remember what you endured. You remember what you overcame. You remember who carried you through it. That memory becomes authority. Listen carefully. Leadership is not loud. It is steady, and steadiness is forged in fire. You are not just surviving trauma. You are being trained for spiritual command under pressure. The world looks for charisma. Heaven looks for capacity. Capacity to remain grounded when others lose balance. Capacity to discern when others are blinded by emotion. Capacity to hold peace in the middle of warfare. That capacity is forming in you, and people are beginning to feel it. They look to you in moments of tension. They wait for your reaction. They watch your response. Why? Because something about you feels stable, safe, rooted. That is authority rising, not authority built on ego, authority built on endurance. You did not ask for the storms, but you mastered them. You did not volunteer for warfare, but you learned its patterns. You did not choose chaos, but you learned to command yourself inside it. Now chaos reveals your growth. Now crisis exposes your strength. Now warfare proves your rank. Darkness cannot intimidate someone who has already survived their worst fears, and you have. That is why your presence calms rooms. That is why your voice cuts through confusion. That is why your silence carries weight. You are not just aware now, you are fortified. Pressure does not scare you, It reveals you. And this level of authority, it cannot be faked. It is earned, it is refined, it is dangerous to the enemy, and this is only getting stronger. Seventh, the attacks intensify precisely when you level up. You have seen this pattern. Every time you grow, resistance grows. Every time you gain clarity, confusion tries to re-enter. Every time you feel peace, something attempts to disturb it. At first, you thought it was coincidence. You wondered why now? Why when I was finally moving forward? Why when I was finally healing? But now you understand. Opposition is not random. It is confirmation. Warfare increases as your frequency rises. Darkness does not waste energy on what is stagnant. It targets movement, it targets elevation, it targets momentum, and you have momentum. Have you noticed how old enemies resurface right before breakthrough? Old temptations, old mindsets, old relationships, old insecurities knocking again. It is not nostalgia, it is strategy. The enemy studies cycles. He watches patterns. He attempts to reintroduce what once worked. But here is what he miscalculates. You are not who you were. The level you survived before is not the level you stand on now. You carry discernment, you carry restraint, you carry authority. So when the attacks increase, instead of panicking, you recognize it. You say, this must mean I am close. That shift is powerful. Most people retreat when resistance rises. You advance. Most people doubt when pressure increases. You stabilize. Because you understand something now. Pressure precedes promotion. Warfare precedes expansion. Resistance precedes reward. The world sees opposition as a sign to quit. The chosen see opposition as a sign of impact. Why would darkness fight you harder if you were insignificant? Why would old enemies reappear if your next level was small? Why would distraction intensify if your destiny was limited? It would not. The fight confirms the value. The resistance confirms the rise. The tension confirms the transition. Listen carefully. You are no longer confused by conflict. You interpret it. You do not internalize every attack. You analyze it. You do not collapse when pressure builds. You prepare. Because you know now. Every time the enemy increases noise, it means heaven is increasing favor. Every time distraction multiplies, it means focus is about to pay off. Every time doubt whispers louder, it means truth is getting closer to manifestation. You are not being attacked because you are weak. You are being resisted because you are advancing. That awareness shifts everything. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And you start declaring, I must be close. That declaration carries authority. Darkness senses it. And it knows something dangerous. You cannot be discouraged the same way anymore. You cannot be delayed the same way anymore. You cannot be intimidated the same way anymore. Because you see the pattern. And when you see the pattern, you break the cycle. Opposition is not a stop sign. It is a signal flare. You are rising, you are marked, you are impossible to suppress, and the resistance proves it. Eighth, your story is becoming a weapon that shifts rooms. You used to hide parts of it. The betrayal, the breakdown, the nights you thought you would not recover. You thought those chapters disqualified you. You thought your scars made you less credible, less polished, less worthy. But now when you speak, atmospheres change. You say a few sentences. The room goes quiet. Not because you are loud, because you are real. Your words carry weight. Weight that cannot be manufactured. Weight that cannot be rehearsed. Weight that only fire produces. Theory can inform, but testimony transforms. And your testimony was forged in fire. Have you noticed how people lean in when you share? How eyes soften, how defenses lower? It is not charisma. It is authority earned through survival. The world talks about struggle. You survived it. The world studies pain. You walk through it. The world quotes resilience. You embodied it. There is a difference. Your scars carry spiritual gravity. They are no longer reminders of weakness. They are evidence of endurance. And endurance releases power. Listen carefully. Darkness wanted your trauma to silence you, to make you ashamed, to make you small, to make you retreat. But God converted it. Now, when you speak about what you endured, it breaks chains in others. Now, when you describe how you survived it, awakens courage in someone who feels trapped. Now, when you stand and refuse to hide your past, it exposes the lie that suffering equals failure. You are not just sharing stories. You are shifting frequencies. Rooms feel it. Conversations change direction. People begin to confront truths they avoided. Because your survival carries activation. Not everyone can handle that. Some will resist you. Some will dismiss you. Some will try to minimize what you say. Why? Because light exposes. And when your story shines, it reveals what others are still hiding. Do not shrink. Do not dilute your testimony to make it easier for fragile egos. Speak. Stand. Own what you walked through. Because what almost broke you is now breaking chains. That is weaponized redemption. Your pain is no longer personal history. It is strategic ammunition. Ammunition against hopelessness. Ammunition against deception. Ammunition against the lie that trauma defines destiny. You are proof that it does not. And proof is powerful. The enemy fears your voice now. Not because it is loud, because it is credible, because it carries fire, because it cannot be dismissed. You are no longer just surviving your past, you are deploying it. And every time you speak with truth, you reclaim territory. Feel that. You are spiritually dangerous now. And this is not even the highest level. Ninth, you no longer identify as wounded. You identify as anointed. This is the shift that changes everything. There was a time when your story sounded like survival. You described what happened to you. You carried the language of damage. You wore the label of the one who went through it. But something shattered. The narrative of victimhood broke. You stopped asking, why did this happen to me? And you started declaring, this was positioning me. Do you feel the difference? Victimhood waits for rescue. Anointing walks in authority. Victimhood replays pain. Anointing redeems it. Victimhood shrinks. Anointing stands. You no longer see your trauma as a curse. You see it as an altar where something was transferred. Strength, discernment, capacity, command. You thought you were losing pieces of yourself. You were shedding weakness. You thought you were being stripped. You were being consecrated. Listen carefully. The fire did not consume you. It crowned you. The betrayal did not end you. It unveiled you. The rejection did not erase you. It marked you. Marked for assignment. Marked for elevation. Marked for spiritual authority. And darkness knows it. That is why the warfare feels different now. It is not trying to wound you. It is trying to intimidate you. Because once you know you are anointed, fear loses its leverage. Once you recognize the transfer, confusion cannot control you. You carry spiritual command now. Not imagined, not borrowed, not temporary, forged, sealed, established. When you walk into environments, you feel it. When you speak, you sense it. When opposition rises, you do not question your identity. You stand in it. You are no longer trying to heal into who you are. You are operating from who you are. That is dangerous to darkness, because what God has converted cannot be reversed. What God has refined cannot be undone. What God has sealed cannot be stolen. Let that settle in your spirit. You are not recovering anymore. You are reigning. You are not coping anymore. You are commanding. You are not surviving anymore. You are governing your atmosphere. This is the final mark. You do not see yourself as the wounded one. You see yourself as the chosen one, and that identity cannot be shaken. Now hear this clearly. You are chosen, not randomly, not accidentally, not temporarily, chosen by design, protected by purpose, strengthened by fire. Everything you endured was preparation. Every tear trained you. Every battle ranked you. Every lonely night positioned you. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was random. Nothing was meaningless. Stand in that truth. Declare it. Type the number 9 in the comments if you know the anointing is real. Subscribe if you are ready to walk in command, not confusion. Share this with another chosen one who needs confirmation, because you were never ordinary. You were never overlooked by heaven. You were being prepared, and now you are spiritually untouchable, and nothing formed against you will stand.